In this demonstration, we're going to add and customize a legend for our ArcMap layout. So in order to do this, we've got our layout here on the right-hand side. I'm going to go to the File menu, or the main menu, sorry, say Insert, Legend. So a couple of things I want to point out here if you're new to doing this is, one is that here I've got all of my layers in my table of contents listed in the legend wizard. There's no obligation to include them all. You have to decide for yourself what should be included in the legend and what shouldn't. So here I happen to have two different copies of the same wards data, and it really doesn't make sense for me to include this twice. So you can easily remove an item. In this case, it's already selected. I'm going to just click the little chevron here and remove it from my list. So now I've got two items in my legend list and I can continue. Oh, by the way, you can move these around if you wanted, for some reason, wards to be listed in your legend above roads. You could use the arrow key to do that, so you can move them around that way. You can also set if you have a very large legend, you can set the number of columns to be more than one. So I'll click Next. Now, by default, the legend will have the title Legend. As a rule of thumb, or as a good guideline, if you're making a thematic map that's going to have a title and it's going to be clear from the title what the topic of the map is, then you don't really necessarily need to include legend in your thematic map, because it's probably only going to have a few items in the legend. If your legend is well designed and your map is well designed, then it should be obvious that it is a map legend. You don't really have to tell people that by including the word legend. You could, if needed, instead of having the title legend here, you could use something like population density, and then maybe in parentheses something like persons per square kilometer, if that was useful. But that's only if it's necessary, if you've got a few items in your legend and you want to make it clear what the specific units are that are being used or something like that. But otherwise, in a lot of cases, you really don't need a legend at all. And I'm going to delete it here and not include one. So I'll click Next. Here you have the option of including a border and a background and a drop shadow. If you're just starting out with map design, I would start by not including any of these things. You don't really need to overdo it. If in this case I'm going to be using a white legend on a white background, so there's no need to have a border. All that would do is sort of break up the page by having this black line around my legend. Of course, if I had, say, water over or underneath the legend, or some other color where I want to make sure that the legend is well delineated, then I would want to use a background and possibly a border, perhaps if it was something subtle. Here I'm going to just leave it the way it is. I'll select Next. Here I'm not really going to change anything. You can change the size of the patch. In other words, the size of the example that's being used in the legend to indicate what that theme is. I'll leave them for now at the default sizes. Same thing here. You can fine-tune the spacing between legend items, things like that. For now, I'll just leave that as the default and click Finish. So it's generating my legend for me, and I will move this over to one corner of the map. And there's just one or two more things I'd like to show you. So I'll zoom in here on the legend itself. One thing you should notice is that the entries for each theme in the legend are based on the file names that are listed in the table of contents on the left. So for example, here we have major_roads, and it's a really quick fix. It's something that, again, may not be obvious to people, like a lot of these little tips and tricks, but it's one of those things that I noticed right away is if somebody's left it like that, it just doesn't look very polished. All you have to do is go to the table of contents in the left-hand side and click on the name of the theme so that you can edit it. And if you change that underscore to a space and click Enter, it automatically updates it in the legend, and that just looks so much better. So for any of the maps that you're creating, be sure that you pay attention to the entries in the legend, and that way you can always make it look a little more polished. Some other things you can do, if you're not quite happy with the way the legend is being shown when you first create it, you can just double click on it and update the properties as you wish. So for example, if I wanted to change the font that's being used for both of my legend entries, I can select them both. I'm just control clicking there to select them. And then I can select a new font for the entries that I have. So let's say I wanted to make it Calibri. Let's make it, oh, I don't know, let's make it 11 point. And if I say OK, and by the way, you can change these other things as well, the size of the layout, the frame, if you want to add those things in later. I'm just going to say OK, and you'll notice that it's changed my font. So another little quick tip is that don't always just accept whatever the default font is. I think it's sort of the sign of somebody that's newer to ArcMap, that you know all of your maps end up having these obscure file names in the legend, and everything is Arial 10 point. And it really only takes a few seconds to change the legend entries and possibly select a font that you think is more appropriate for your map, and you'll end up with a map that will very quickly look much more polished.